does national test data reveal about the status of the American education system? I'm Dr. Emily Sherwood. If you're interested in education policy or global education, please like and subscribe. So my last video I talked about PISA, P-I-S-A, which is a test that's given usually every 3 years to students around the world. And if you're interested in this video, it's still up, and I do encourage you to watch it because it was very interesting. And what it found was that the United States actually, despite all that you heard about COVID and how it ruined education, it was so awful, the United States actually for 2018 to 2022 stayed the same. And so the status of the United States as far as education is actually higher than most Western European and most Northern European countries at this time. So it was very interesting results. But that was 2022, and it's just one test result, and it's helpful always to have more than one test result when you're looking at data, because tests are very individual. They can show different things depending on the date, depending on the population. There are just lots of things that can influence the test. So it's always good to have more than one test to look at. And also it's been since 2022, which 3 years is in education, things can change within 3 years. So what did I find? Well, what I did was I looked at the NAEP test, National Assessment of Educational Progress, NAEP. And the NAEP test is given nationwide every year in math and reading, and it's given to sampled students. So students are chosen, a computer system chooses who's going to test, and they do that to make sure that certain groups are represented, ethnicities. Make sure that students with disabilities are represented, students who are English learners, all of that. And so within a school, only a few students may take the test. And it's given in grades 4 and grades 8. And it's given nationwide in public schools and also in Catholic private schools. It's only in Catholic private schools as far as private schools. So, so what the test found was that there was a drop, which was expected because of COVID. So the drop in 2022 was there, and actually in some test scores there was a slight drop even in 2018. Pretty much every score dropped in 2022, which wasn't unexpected because of COVID. What was interesting though is that the drop was most severe among students who were at the very low end of scores. So in other words, students who did not score well. So those are students who typically struggle. Students who do poorly in a standardized test are usually the ones who struggle. Not always, but generally that's the case. And the decline was much bigger with those students. And also, in almost every case, looking at the test scores of both reading and math, students who are at the 90th percentile, so in other words, your top students who did better than 90% of the students taking the test, those students, their test scores either stayed the same or went up from 2022 to 2024. Whereas with these lower scoring students, the test scores are all gone down. So that suggests that where education is really struggling is with this bottom number of students, and that make these students who did not score well, the students who are really struggling, what you might call the basic level, the students who are not on grade level, who have, are years behind in math and reading. Generally, those are the students who score the lowest. And so that shows that we're really struggling with these students. And generally, these are the most vulnerable students. These are the students who are more likely to be in poverty, to have disabilities, to be English learners, to be struggling socio-emotionally, all of those things. These students are more likely to have those issues. To be truant, that's a huge issue right now, to not be at school all the time. These students who score at this very low level oftentimes are those most vulnerable students. And so that's where we're really struggling. And this goes along with the narrative that you hear in schools, which is, these kids can't read. There are all these kids coming to me and they can't read. It's because there are more kids who can't read at that bottom level. The students who can read, who are at grade level or even a little bit above, are doing well. It's these students at the lowest level who are struggling. And that makes sense because COVID was such a difficult time, particularly for students who were in vulnerable situations. These are the students who were less likely to have technology at home to do their classes, who had a lot of family responsibilities and couldn't always do their classes, who needed things in schools like food, who relied on school food and relied on maybe school mental health services or some other services, and they didn't get that during that time. So overall, the overarching idea as far as the test scores, if you look at the scores as a whole, is that we are in reading more or less back to 1992, in the early 90s, when there was a lot of reading initiatives, particularly for these low-level students, what you might call intervention, in the 1990s and the early 2000s. And you really saw a big jump in about 2000 with reading. And that's when there were a lot of initiatives. And that peaked in the probably about 2015, and it kind of stayed the same. And now with reading, we're kind of back at that early stage. With math, we are still higher than we were in the early 90s because math really shot up. As much as math is a hard subject for students, and it's still something that many students struggle with, it is something that saw massive improvement, again, in the same time period, the 1990s and the early 2000s. And so the bottom line is that COVID did really harm the education system and other factors. There are other factors that I'm going to go to in the next video, societal factors that are really hurting education. But again, it's these most vulnerable students, the students who score the lowest, who are really struggling with this. So I hope you found this interesting, and the next video I'm going to talk about some of these factors, some of these societal factors that are really affecting particularly the most vulnerable students. Thank you, and keep learning.